I want to share with us today a history bit that I believe will help to provide some explanation and maybe some clarity. And my purpose for providing this history bit today has to do with the various ways in which different Messianic groups, congregations, Israelite communities say the name of the Most High. Some say his name as Yahweh, some say his name as Yahweh, some say his name as Yahuwah. And so I wanted to share some information with us to primarily give an explanation as to why in this particular ministry and why as a leader of this ministry, when we say the name of the Most High, we say Yahuwah. And I think that as we discover the background behind it, it'll help give us just a little bit more clarity. I say that primarily because for the most part, those of us who come into the arena of whether it's Messianic Judaism or whether it's Messianic Israelitism or whether it's Hebrew roots or whether it's Hebrew Israelitism, whatever name that is put on it to describe the varying groups that are Torah observant, keeping Israelite people in HaMashiach. It is important that we have an understanding of why we say what we say. Some of us, we echo what we have learned from others. When most hear people use the term Yahweh, they say, well, his name is Yahweh. That's what they hear someone on TV say. That's what they've heard Bible teachers say and echo. But it's very important that when we talk about the declaring of the name, that we have an understanding based upon scholarship. Right. Amen. Amen. Everything we do, we should do it based upon scholarship, not based upon what might be prominent. Because over the centuries, believe it or not, there's been a great deal of things that have changed. And so I want to present some information to us that hopefully will help us to understand the basis behind why we, in this ministry, use the term Yahuwah. Now, I have some slides that I want to show, which is going to give us some information, some historical information. No, you don't have to, not at all. And the first thing that I want to go over has to do with the testimony of the historian Josephus. How many of you heard of Josephus? Now, Josephus is regarded as the Jewish historian. He is somewhat the go-to person. Of course, he's passed now because he lived in the 1st century CE. But he is the go-to person who has provided a history of the Judean Israelites. He's recorded the wars of the Judean Israelites and the antiquities of the Judean Israelites regarding the history. And so the greater amount of information that we have outside of the text of the scriptures with regard to the history of the Judean Israelites, it comes from Josephus and the information that he has provided. Now, Josephus, in his providing of information, was very detailed in a number of things that he had to say. He provided great descriptions of the temple. He provided descriptions of the priest's garments. And in this particular slide regarding the testimony of Josephus, he describes the mitre that was on the head of the high priest. Torah describes what the high priest was supposed to wear when he would prepare to perform his service in the temple. Now here, as we have on the slide, we're told, quote, a mitre also of fine linen encompassed his head. This is with regard to what the high priest would wear, which was tied by a blue ribbon, about which there was another golden crown, in which was engraved the sacred name. It consists of 4 vowels. You notice I have here in bold, consists of 4 vowels. I want you to keep that in your mind. And for those who would like to do a fact check or verify, you can go to War of the Jews, Book 5, Chapter 5, Paragraph 7. So once you go and you look it up, you get to it, you find Paragraph 7 of Chapter 5, you read through it, and you'll find the statement. Now, the reason why I wanted to provide this testimony of Josephus is because Josephus here says something that I find to be very, very important. And of course, in Josephus's day, it was common knowledge among them with regard to the language of Hebrew. And during that time, they used both the Paleo-Hebrew and they also used the block script Hebrew as well, or basically what we would call the Aramaic text. That's the block script. Now, the reason why I'm highlighting this particular here, that the name of Elohim was engraved across the golden crown, is because he says it consists of 4 vowels. Now, one might say, well, what's the deal with that? The reason why that's significant is because for those of us who have had opportunity to be trained in Bible college, seminary, and who have taken Hebrew, we were taught something a little different with reference to the Hebrew language and the letters and what they represent. And so I want to provide the second slide, which is going to give us another statement. You bring the next slide up.
I don't know how to.
Let me help you out.
I have to close the whole thing down.
No.
Okay. Go this way.
You just hit that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, in this statement that we have here, this is a statement that I found in an article that is called The Name of God, and it is from a website called Jew Facts, and it's primarily a rabbinic Jewish site where it has information containing a variety of different subjects. And in this particular article, it dealt with the name of Elohim, and it dealt with the concept of the ineffable name and things concerning not pronouncing the name because there's not enough information that they had in order to pronounce it correctly. And so the statement came up with regard to what Josephus said. And so in this statement, I quote, historian Flavius Josephus, who was born a Kohen, so one of the reasons why Josephus knows all of the information that he knows is because he was born in the priestly line. All right? And it says, who was born a Kohen at a time when the pronunciation of the name was still known. Now, I'll keep reading before I make any more comments. He said that the name was for vowels. And they note in War of the Jews, Book 5, Chapter 5, probably referring to the fact that each of the four consonants in the name can serve in Hebrew as a vowel or vowel marker. Now, I need to comment on this particular statement because this statement, of course, as I mentioned, it has been provided from a rabbinic Jewish article on the subject of the name of God, and the perspective that rabbinic Judaism has is that you do not say the name of Elohim because it's too holy to say, and according to their perspective, they don't know how to pronounce it. But because of what Josephus had noted, Josephus stated that they are all vowels, which they recognize, and they recognize that during the time in which Josephus had made this particular statement, that it was a time when the pronunciation of the name was known. So they give credible witness to the fact that during Josephus' time, they were pronouncing the name and knew the name. Now, Josephus lived during the 1st century CE. He lived prior to the destruction of the temple. So during that time, they knew how to pronounce the name of the Most High. They had no issues with pronouncing the name of the Most High. But things kind of changed, of course, after the destruction of the temple, where the Pharisaic religious leadership did not want to use the name of the Most High and chose to use a substitute word, Adonai, in place of the actual name. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because as Hebrew began to be taught in later centuries from the 1st century, the concept within the teaching is that there are no vowels in the Hebrew language. Now, when I learned Hebrew, there were some basic rules that we were taught. We were taught that there are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet and that they are all consonants.
Yes.
Can you pull up the next slide? In the next slide here, we're looking at modern biblical Hebrew. And what I'm doing, I am sharing some statements from the book that I actually had when I took Hebrew. And the book that I have right here is called Biblical Hebrew, Step by Step by Menahem Mansour. It's kind of beat up, as you know. I got pages falling out of this. But this is the text that I used when I took Hebrew. And according to Biblical Hebrew, Step by Step, by Menahem Mansour, copyright 1957, the following is noted about Biblical Hebrew. No, modern Hebrew, the development of which has begun in the present century. This is noted on page 9. Now, I pulled this note out because modern Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, that which is taught in the seminaries, and most of us are really not aware of this, really came into play in the 1900s. I'm saying that because much of the present teaching and thinking, as we have been taught with regard to biblical Hebrew, which is also called modern Hebrew, is somewhat of a new development. This is important for us to understand, because most of us, when we are trained in Hebrew, we think, well, this is the way it's always been. I'll keep going. Quote, there are 22 consonants in the Hebrew alphabet. That's on page 13 of the book that I showed you. Another statement, remember, there are only 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. Strictly speaking, there are no special letters to represent the vowels. Although, as we shall see later, 2 consonants are sometimes used as vowels, which help to facilitate reading. It's on page 15. This is in the book that I had for text in learning Hebrew. Now, what's interesting about these statements is that they are different with respect to the first century CE understanding of the languages, or shall I say, the alphabet. Because according to Josephus, he noted very plainly that the sacred name of the Most High, which is composed of the Yod, the He, the Wav, and the He, he called them all vowels. But they teach us in Hebrew that there are no vowels, but possibly 2. And the reason behind it is to structure the mind of those who are learning Hebrew to utilize the nikudot. Now, nikudot, it just simply means these are the vowel designations that are used in the Hebrew words, where you have dashes, markings, dots, and they all have vowel sounds. But before all of that, the ancient Hebrew, they didn't have any nikudot, but they did have vowels. And when we listen to Josephus in telling us that the sacred name was all vowels, gives us the clue as to how we are to pronounce the name of Elohim. Now, for those of you who have not had Hebrew yet, you don't know what the vowels sound like, let me help you out. The Yod as a vowel is I. Everyone say I. Yeah. I. That's how you pronounce it as a vowel. As a consonant, the Yod is Y. Yeah. Just like the Y. It's like how the Y has the Y sound in the word you, but if you have the Y at the end of a word, like Sally, you know, with the Y, or Millie with the Y. I had to be corrected one time with reference to Millie's name. But when you have the Y as a vowel, it has the I sound. And English carries that same parallel from the ancient Hebrew. It has been the language that has served as a proto for all of the other languages reference to the vowels. So the Yod as a vowel is the I. The Hey is Ah. The Wav is U. The Hey is Ah. So when we pronounce the name Yahuwah or Yahuwah, we're pronouncing it that way because we are pronouncing the vowels. Everybody catch that? Now, when you say that Hebrew has no vowels and all you have is consonants, then you do the best you can with the consonants. You'll come up with Yahweh. Those are consonants. You'll come up with Yahweh, or you'll come up with Yahweh when you pronounce it as consonants. But because we have information that the way in which you pronounce the name is based upon the vowel sounds, it's not hard to figure out how you pronounce the name. At least getting as closest to the accurate pronunciation of the name. And this is just a piece of the information. There's other evidences and there's other information that deal with how the name is to be pronounced that way because of the Yahu on the end of names. And so I wanted to share this with us today just to give us some information so that we might know the basis behind why we have chosen to pronounce the Most High's name the way we do. There are those who don't understand why we pronounce it that way. But when you understand that the name is actually vowels, and you pronounce the vowels, then it makes sense now. And so I trust that this information has somewhat helped to provide clarity in our understanding as to the basis behind the use and the pronouncing of the name in the way we pronounce the name. Now, I do want to say this. I am not one that condemns anyone for pronouncing the name of Yahuwah in a manner that is different, because people are going to do things that they're comfortable with because that's all they know. And so I'm not one that says, well, you're doing it wrong and that's not right and you're messing it up. No, everyone should have the freedom to be able to express what they understand. I'm a firm believer in that. But I also am a firm believer in the fact that when you learn better, you ought to do better. I'm a firm believer in that. I believe that once you obtain scholarship on something, when you learn, then you should adjust. Because this is how we grow. And we should also be mindful of changes that have occurred throughout the centuries. Because there have been changes that occurred throughout the centuries. And I believe that as the Most High is bringing us to the time where we are getting ready for HaMashiach's return, that we ought to do the very best we can to implement those things that are as accurate as possible in how we do things. And so with that, the Most High be praised.